Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers podcast. On today's episode, we're talking about Connor Hellebuyck. Is he a realistic option for the Edmonton Oilers? Plus, we are just a week away from the NHL Draft. So, what are the realistic draft scenarios for the Edmonton Oilers at the NHL Draft? And we go through the 15 games of Derick Brassard as an Edmonton Oiler as we round out our forwards of our season report card. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. Thank you so much for joining us today. As mentioned on today's episode, what would it take for Edmonton to pull Connor Hellebuyck out of Winnipeg, and is it realistic at all? We will get into that in just a bit. Plus, again, the NHL Draft is just about a week away. So what could the Edmonton Oilers do with that 29th overall pick in the first round? Are they going to keep it? Will they trade it? We will get into some of the realistic scenarios. Plus, Derick Brassard, 15 games for the Edmonton Oilers. I was shocked about that. But just how did he do in his season report card? All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Plus, we're on YouTube as well, so if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you go and do that. Alrighty, let's get into the Connor Hellebuyck talk, because it seems like he is the flavor of the day, or at least up until the weekend for the Edmonton Oilers, as it's been reported recently, well, not really reported, that Connor Hellebuyck could be a casualty out of Winnipeg in the new regime, but he could. Let's be realistic. The Winnipeg Jets might be in the midst of a rebuild. Just realistic. They're going to have a new regime coming in, new coaches. Mark Scheifele came out publicly saying, well, we're going to have to wait and see where we're sitting to see if I still want to be here, basically. And it kind of caused a little bit of a stir. Will we have the same team we see now from Winnipeg going into next year? How many changes? What will change? Connor Hellebuyck has been chatted about recently, and some people have linked the Oilers to Connor Hellebuyck. So, what would it take, and is it at all realistic? Well, unfortunately, everybody, it would take a lot. And the Edmonton Oilers don't really have a lot to give up right now. Let's go through some of the assets that the Edmonton Oilers could give up for Connor Hellebuyck, and then we'll bring it all back around and see if it is realistic for the Edmonton Oilers to strike a deal with the Winnipeg Jets for the goaltender. The first thing is that, well, the Winnipeg Jets are going to want futures in this trade, whether that's a first rounder. It's going to be a first round pick. Seems like the Edmonton Oilers might actually be more open to trading next year's pick as opposed to this year's pick, so we will see if that's true. They're going to want futures, and the Edmonton Oilers don't really have draft picks. The Edmonton Oilers have one pick in the first 150 picks in this year's NHL Draft, and that's at 29. So if the Edmonton Oilers were to trade that first round pick, it would be 4 more picks. So it doesn't make sense that the Edmonton Oilers would just throw in a pick for in a package with, say, like a Tyson Barrie, this, that, or the other thing. If the Oilers aren't going to get draft picks in return, that would mean the Oilers' draft picks would only be in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round. It doesn't really make a lot of sense. So that first round pick for this year is out of the question for me. Second thing is there's prospects on the table that the Edmonton Oilers seem like, and for a very long time, we're probably going to get out of the Edmonton Oilers organization. One being Dmitry Samorukov. And I don't think he really nudges the needle too much for Winnipeg for them to go, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. I don't think he's going to be a centerpiece. He is a very good asset for an Oilers trade. In fact, he's going to be probably a pretty decent NHLer. But he's not going to be a centerpiece of a trade, not especially for somebody like Connor Hellebuyck. And plus, you want to talk about young players, Xavier Bourgault has played himself into, at the worst next year at camp, a late camp cut at the worst, because all the stuff that he's done this past season for Shawinigan, he was one of the last cuts for the Edmonton Oilers last season at training camp. Dare I say he might be one of the names that is in the lineup come game one? I don't know. It'll all depend on his training camp. But even if he does have a middle of the road training camp, with what he's done with the Shawinigan Cataracts this year, I mean, he's played himself into the, no matter what he does in training camp, everybody will always say, yeah, but look at what he did. It's right there. It's right there. Let's see if he can figure it out just at the end. So Xavier Bourgault isn't going to be traded this offseason. Sorry to say. Well, not really, because he's been fantastic. But if you're looking for assets for the Edmonton Oilers, Xavier Bourgault just is not going to be one of those guys heading out. The other thing is the Edmonton Oilers RFA situation. Now, the Oilers do have some RFAs that do look pretty appetizing in the trade market. I'm looking at Jesse Puljujarvi and Kailer Yamamoto. But I don't think, and I don't see Jesse Puljujarvi being really a player that Winnipeg really wants to bring in, and I don't think he fits that not even regime over there, because we don't know what that regime's going to be, but I don't think he really fits the Winnipeg Jet MO. He doesn't seem like a Jet type of player, and really the philosophy of the Winnipeg Jets is that hard-nosed type of player. I don't really see Jesse Puljujarvi fitting in there. So I don't think if the Edmonton Oilers were to come to the Winnipeg Jets with a package, including Jesse Puljujarvi, that they would go, yeah, you know what? Yeah, sure, let's bring it in. However, I do see them looking at Kailer Yamamoto and going, that's somebody we want. However, the Edmonton Oilers have the exact same thinking and want to bring Yamamoto back in. I don't see him being moved at all. I think him and McLeod are going to be like 1A and 1B when it comes to the RFAs. If not, if the Oilers don't bring in Kane again, are going to be at the top of the Oilers re-signing list when it comes to this offseason. So Puljujarvi doesn't really budge the needle. Yamamoto is basically almost an untouchable for the Oilers in the trade market, almost, especially in this. And then the final thing that I want to bring in for the Edmonton Oilers as well in this Connor Hellebuyck talk is Tyson Barrie. Is Tyson Barrie a fantastic defenseman? Probably, yes. Is he a really good defenseman? Yes, absolutely. Is his offensive upside something that a lot of teams really, really want? Yeah, no kidding. I mean, in his few seasons with the Edmonton Oilers, 40 assists a couple seasons ago, 35 plus this season with the Oilers this year. I think he had 34 maybe for the Edmonton Oilers off the top of my head this year. Like, he is a very solid offensive defenseman. And then when Woodcroft came in, he really honed in on that defensive skill of especially, as an offensive puck-moving defenseman. But he's too old and not the type. And not too old as in, he's getting old. But he's too old when it comes to a centerpiece of a trade like this. You're going to want a younger guy for a franchise goaltender. Connor Hellebuyck is a franchise goaltender. One of Vezina is one of the top goaltenders in the league. And Tyson Barrie, maybe a second pairing defenseman in Winnipeg in a defensive core that's already pretty decent. I know a lot of people give it a lot of pull. I like their defensive core. I think they have a lot of good things on the top end, a lot of solid things on the bottom end as well. So I don't really see Tyson Barrie really moving the needle as well for the Winnipeg Jets in a Connor Hellebuyck trade at all. So taking a look at all of those aspects, are the Edmonton Oilers really in the race for Connor Hellebuyck? No. I think it's a fever dream. I think it's a pipe dream. It seems almost too good to be true. In most cases, if that's the case, it's probably too good to be true. Also, it sounds like from some of the people I've talked to, it's just that there's not really anything the Oilers can offer. So, not really. Sometimes there's smoke, or where there's smoke, there's a fire. Sometimes where there's smoke, it's just a dying one. So, it doesn't seem like Connor Hellebuyck will be an Oiler, but it's crazy times. Why not chat about it? Alrighty, let's move into our NHL draft coverage. As yes, the Oilers have a fun little pick at 29. Are they going to move it? Are they going to keep it? If they do, who do they pick? We will get into that in just a second. But first, I want to tell you about our partners over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including next year's NHL Stanley Cup odds. Now, Oilers fans, I want you to sit down for this because I know you're not going to be happy about it. The Toronto Maple Leafs have the third best odds to win the Stanley Cup next year in all of the NHL. I believe it's plus 900. The Calgary Flames have the ninth best odds to win the Stanley Cup this season, or next season, I should say, on BetOnline, at plus 1,800. The Edmonton Oilers have the 10th best odds to win the Stanley Cup, behind Toronto, behind Calgary, at plus 2,000. Are you kidding me? We get to the Final Four for the first time in how long, and we get disrespected like that? Come on, Oilers fans, you got to be as angry as I am. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live sports, live betting, esports, scores, and much more. And BetOnline remains the best spot for all your scores, podcasts, news, and everything you need this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. This weekend, Israel Adesanya and Jared Cannonier. Oh my goodness. My friends and I are already texting going, we got to go here. We got to make sure we catch it. Is this UFC card, UFC 276, I believe it is? Oh my God. Whoa, this is going to be a great card. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. Alrighty. Oh, I almost forgot our quick little hydration break for today. Happy Thursday, everybody. Make sure you stay hydrated. As I drink Gatorade, which is, I think, counterproductive. Marketing, baby. That's how it works. But anyways, what a Thursday. Yesterday was supposed to rain and it was sunny the whole day. I'm done trying to give these weather updates because I'm wrong all the time. Anyways, let's move on to the NHL draft because yes, we are just under a week away, or just over a week, basically a week away from the NHL draft. My favorite time of the year. I love the NHL draft. Probably because when I was growing up, the Edmonton Oilers had quite a few pretty decent picks, or at least early picks. I'm looking at you, Jordan Eberle, Taylor Hall, Magnus Payarvi, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. I could go on and on about all the picks that I watched the Oilers make. And really, it weirdly got me excited for the Edmonton Oilers the next year, even though we were in the decade of darkness. But regardless, the Edmonton Oilers aren't drafting very high this year because they were in that Final Four, as I just complained about in that ad read. So the Edmonton Oilers are picking 29th overall. So what does that mean for the Oilers? Well, they don't have a second, third, or fourth round pick in this year's draft. They only have one pick in the first 150 in this draft. So kind of an important weekend, or kind of an important draft for the Edmonton Oilers, because they either have to hit on every pick they make or they get creative. So what are three draft scenarios, or draft night scenarios, first round draft night scenarios that are realistic from the Edmonton Oilers? Well, the first one is they keep it. They keep the pick and they pick a forward. Not just any forward, though, because you take a look at the first rounders that the Edmonton Oilers have had over the last few years. You take a look at Xavier Bourgault. You have Philip Broberg and Evan Bouchard, Dylan Holloway as well. And we can even go back to, who did I mention? Xavier Bourgault. Oh, I mentioned Dylan Holloway. I forgot who else I was going to mention as well. But first round, Kyler Yamamoto. That's who I was going to mention as well. So the Oilers have had a decent mix between forwards and defensemen. However, those defensemen are now starting to come into their own. The Evan Bouchards you know about. Philip Broberg is just starting to tip his toe in there and will be a full-time Oiler next year. But you take a look at the Oilers' organizational depth, and you know what? The forward depth is starting to show back up again. I mean, a couple years ago, the Edmonton Oilers picked all forwards in the draft. That means that was the Dylan Holloway year, so that was Dylan Holloway. They picked, I believe that was also Petrov's year, Tyler Tullio. They also selected Carter Savoy as well. So the Edmonton Oilers do have a very solid young forward depth coming up, plus Bourgault, as we mentioned, already mentioned Holloway. So just a lot of young forward depth. But they're very offensively minded. So I think if the Oilers were to keep that pick and draft a forward, it would be Reed Schaefer from the Seattle Thunderbirds. We talked about Reed Schaefer a couple of weeks ago. Just a great talent. The thing about Reed Schaefer that I think really is special for the Edmonton Oilers and for them to look at him and go, okay, this is the guy we're picking in the first round or with this pick, is whether or not people behind them are going to pick Schaefer, because if they don't, they could, well, I could spoil it, trade down for that as well. But Reed Schaefer just has that grit in him. He's not necessarily going to fight all the time. He isn't going to drop the gloves, but he just is a pain to play against. And who else is a pain to play against? Matthew Tkachuk. I'm not comparing him to Matthew Tkachuk whatsoever. But the Edmonton Oilers, if they're going to lose a guy like Zach Kassian, if Evander Kane doesn't re-sign, then the Edmonton Oilers are going to need to find some grit somewhere. I mean, Reed Schaefer has some size on him, 6'3", probably going to grow into a 6'4", 6'5" type frame, 205 plus pounds potentially when he gets into full as an adult, I guess. And he still has that scoring touch around him in 66 games. As we mentioned, 66 games, 32 goals, 26 assists, 58 points for Reed Schaefer this year. And the Seattle Thunderbirds. And then in the playoffs, 25 games played, 6 goals, 15 assists, 21 points. Almost a point per game player while still having that edge. And I say that edge because in the regular season, 88 penalty minutes. And he still managed 58 points and 32 goals. In the playoffs, 32 penalty minutes. 32 in 25 games. Now, I know a lot of people go, oh, so he's undisciplined. No, he is a gritty player. He is a WHL player. And he is very impressive. A guy who is a little bit up and down in draft rankings, so we shall see where the Edmonton Oilers value him or where the NHL really values him as well. And the other name as well for forward, I kind of include this as a 1B, is Luca Del Bel Belluz. We talked about him recently, but if you didn't catch that episode, 68 games played, 30 goals, 46 assists, 76 points for Luca Del Bel Belluz, and it seems like he might fall into that late 20s area. So a name for the Oilers to take a look at as well. A big body too, can really facilitate on a power play with the puck and in the offensive zone. We shall see if he could be a guy that the Oilers take a look at as well. Also, the second thing that the Edmonton Oilers could do with their draft pick this year is keep it and draft a defenseman. Now, I know you're sitting there and go, yeah, no kidding. They're either going to pick a forward or a defenseman. But again, that forward that we are taking a look at isn't just any forward. We're taking a look at a forward who can kind of agitate, play a 200-foot game, and Reed Schaefer is that guy. But at defense, the Edmonton Oilers, like we mentioned, have Broberg, have Bouchard, and then after that, it's kind of a little bit of a drop-off. Niemelainen, Samorukov, and even Vincent Desharnais has been getting some love recently from the Edmonton Oilers, including Ken Holland has mentioned his name. Bob Stauffer has mentioned his name as well, so potentially a name to take a look at as well for the Oilers is Vincent Desharnais. Also, guys like Phil Kemp, I really like Michael Kesselring, but those aren't those top end guys. So what are some guys that the Edmonton Oilers, or who are some guys that the Edmonton Oilers could take a look at defensively around that area? Well, the first name is Owen Pickering from the Swift Current Broncos. Not too bad, and these go by, the names that I'm going to mention are going to go from the highest ranked on Bob McKenzie's TSN list to the lowest ranked, just so, because they're basically, these are all within the 20s to the 30s, 40s area. Again, the Oilers are picking 29th. Not everyone's going to be viewing these players the same. Some of them will go very high. Some of them won't go very high. Some will follow the Oilers. Some will fall to the third round. Either way, Owen Pickering in 62 games played, 9 goals, 24 assists, 33 points for the Swift Current Broncos in the WHL. Very solid defenseman is Owen Pickering. Denton Matechuk, another WHL guy, 65 games played, 13 goals, 51 assists for 64 points. I could see him kind of getting his stock pumped up a little bit more. A good old WHL kid as well for the Moose Jaw Warriors. But I could really see the Edmonton Oilers trying to make a push for Matechuk. Very solid WHL player, as I mentioned. And a guy who would really shore up that defense as well. Ryan Chesley, a name that we talked about a couple weeks ago as well, from the U.S. National Team Development Program. 26 games played for them in the USHL, 5 goals, 10 assists, 15 points for them there. He's committed to the University of Minnesota next season, so if the Oilers, even if he were to have a fantastic camp, he wouldn't be on the Oilers. He would be heading to the NCAA, which is fine. None of these guys will be on the Oilers next year, again, unless they absolutely tear it up in their training camp and make the Oilers have no choice but to put them on the team. The other name, these next two names are kind of meh, we'll see. Works in progress, a couple projects, but could work out in the long end, or in the long story, I guess. Leon Bichelle, a guy from the SHL, the Swedish Hockey League, used to be the Swedish Elite League, now the Swedish Hockey League. For Leksands, his numbers aren't that impressive, but when you take a look at a lot of defensemen coming out of Sweden, coming out of the European leagues, not a lot of their numbers are too impressive. You're not really looking for that type of output from them. But in 29 games played, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points. Playing against men for the first time in his career, not too bad. And the final name from the Gatineau Olympique, I don't think they're the Olympique anymore, but Tristan Lanau, 63 games played, 12 goals, 31 assists for them in the Q, 43 points. So some scoring talent or scoring offensive upside from these defensemen, but they also, a lot of them, have the size, have the movement, have the defensive IQ to become very solid defensemen. So those are 5 names that you might need five names you need to take a look at, or may need to take a look at, because the Edmonton Oilers might be looking at them as well. And the third and final option for the Edmonton Oilers, a realistic scenario on draft day for the Edmonton Oilers is they trade the pick. They trade the 29th overall, and I just mentioned I don't think that if they do trade the pick, it's going to be for a top-end player. Because the Edmonton Oilers, if they do that, only have 3 picks in the draft, and none of them are in the top 150 picks. None of them. So if the Edmonton Oilers were to trade that first-round pick, I think it would only really be for a second, third, maybe a 4th rounder. That's it. That is it. They're trading that pick to move down. But if they do trade that pick to move down, you could take a look at a Reed Schaefer later on in the draft. You don't have to reach for a guy like that. You don't have to reach for a Michael Del Bel-Belluz or a Philip Bystelt or a number of players that could be on your list, but you have to reach because you don't have that second or third round pick. But if you do trade for that and you do trade that first round pick, then hey, you don't have to reach and be a little hit on every pick, essentially. That is what 3 possible scenarios I think the Edmonton Oilers might have or might do on draft day. Which one do you think is the most realistic? And if the Oilers do keep that pick, who do you want the Oilers to pick? I don't want to hear Kevin Korchinski, okay? I don't. I know somebody commented Kevin Korchinski. I'm not coming after you. I talked about Korchinski yesterday. I don't mind Korchinski. He's a good offensive defenseman, but I don't think he'll be where the Edmonton Oilers will be picking. A lot of steam. Anyways, I'm getting on about Korchinski. Let's move on to Derick Brassard, as his 15-game season for the Edmonton Oilers was kind of odd. I was surprised he even played 15 games. But before we move on from the draft, thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Like I mentioned, the NHL Draft is right around the corner, and our team of local hosts and draft experts are breaking it down with insights and analysis from every first round pick. Join me 15 minutes after the Edmonton Oilers potentially make their 29th overall selection on YouTube for all the latest breakdowns. And plus, if the Edmonton Oilers do make a pick or do make a trade as well, you can also get our immediate reaction from that as well. Make sure you subscribe to our Locked On Oilers YouTube, for all the latest breakdowns and live reactions on the NHL Draft and much more. Alrighty, as I go to grab my notes from the short-lived Derick Brassard era of the Edmonton Oilers. Just before we do move on as well, I do have the TV on to the side. I'm recording this, full transparency, on Wednesday evening. And a huge congratulations to the Memorial Cup hosts, the St. John Sea Dogs, as they won the Memorial Cup. Huge congratulations. And I know I mentioned the Edmonton Oil Kings would be the team that would be here winning it tonight. But hey, at least it went to the host, and it went to the one team the Oilers beat. So Oil Kings beat. So that's okay. We'll take that. Huge congratulations to them. We shall see, well, the Memorial Cup next year. Ain't that right, Oil Kings fans? Alrighty. Derick Brassard. What a weird, tumultuous era that was for the Edmonton Oilers, as 15 games played for Derick Brassard as he was traded to the Oilers at the trade deadline for a 4th-round pick in 2023. At the time, it was kind of an odd trade. A lot of people were going, oh, okay, sure, but why? It seemed like an asset that the Edmonton Oilers could have just kept. Not too bad of a season, I guess. Era, something from Derick Brassard. 15 games played. As I mentioned, I was kind of shocked by that. I didn't even really feel like he played 15 games, for the Edmonton Oilers. But he did. In those 15 regular season games, 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points. Not too bad, to be honest with you, in 15 games. A bottom 6 guy, so he's not necessarily going to be playing all those important minutes. But he was still kind of productive, including one of those goals was a game winner. However, I don't know what happened between those 15 games and the playoffs. Derick Brassard only played in 1 game in the playoffs and didn't get a goal or an assist or really a point. Didn't really do anything in that game. Kind of odd how he just randomly fell out in the most important time for the Edmonton Oilers. That was kind of weird. I don't know if I missed something or what, but yeah, the Edmonton Oilers went from playing 15 games for Derick Brassard to 1 in the playoffs. But let's take a look at my favorite stat, the goals for and goals against per 60 minutes. And it's pretty interesting to take a look at. The goals for is not the best, especially at 5-on-5 or really in all situations. In all situations, he had a 1.6 goals for per 60 minutes, which was good for 27th on the team. And at 5-on-5, 1.23, which was good for 30th, or also known as last on the Edmonton Oilers last season. maybe that's where the Edmonton Oilers took a look at his game in the playoffs and just went, you know what? This isn't working out. But then you take a look at his goals against per 60 and you go, wait a minute. In all situations, he had a 2.44 goals against per 60 minutes, which was good for 5th on the team. And at 5-on-5, he had a 2.49 goals against per 60, which was good for 8th on the team. Okay, I kind of dig it. That's not too bad. So, a guy who can, I guess he did score a pretty important goal for the Edmonton Oilers in a game-winning goal situation. He was preventing goals for the Edmonton Oilers. He was a leader. The Edmonton Oilers were his 10th team he's played for in the NHL in his career, so he has experience. Not in really the grand scheme of things for a 4th-round pick next year. Not too bad of an acquisition for the Edmonton Oilers. Derick Brassard, I'll give you a C+. Not too bad. Not too influential, but not to the point where you were coming in and basically doing nothing and kind of hurting the Edmonton Oilers like Josh Archibald was. But you came in, had some pretty solid defensive numbers. You had the impact on the players, whether or not that has been reported on or not, or really said. Any guy who's coming in with experience from 9 other teams is doing something for your younger guys. But we shall call it there. The draft is only a week away. I'm getting so excited for the news. The rush. It sounds like the Edmonton Oilers, the draft week will be when the Edmonton Oilers start making their moves. So tomorrow's Friday. Enjoy that Friday. Enjoy that Canada Day. Because after that, when we come back from the weekend, it's draft week and the silly season starts, baby. Alrighty, let's call it there. I hope you have a wonderful Thursday. I hope the weather holds. I'm not going to talk about the weather anymore because it seems like I'm wrong every time. Either way, I hope you have a wonderful day and don't do anything I wouldn't do.